Record?
Yes, you do.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Fred Giannelli. He is an American electronic musician, and he goes back to Psychic TV, Genesis P. Org, and some of the early experiences in acid house music. So he's going to talk about that. Fred, are you there?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it. You have quite a history. You have a bunch of projects and aliases, and you go by the Kooky Scientist, Acid DJ, Kinky Scientist, Danuve. But can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got started in electronic music?
Well, I started out as a guitarist at the age of 13 and just wanted to produce records. So I went to college for a little while, and then I studied philosophy and also worked in a recording studio, which was kind of a commercial jingle studio. And they helped out friends of mine who had bands, and I did their live sound, and then I ended up getting into producing their records and stuff. So. And
that was all outside of Boston or in eastern Massachusetts?
Yeah, it was all in Boston, yeah.
Gotcha. And and then, you know, at a fairly early age, you got involved in some other early bands. Can you talk about those?
Well, let's see. Before I met Genesis P. Org, that was in 1984, so I had done, I produced a 7-inch record for a friend of mine, had a kind of a ska band called Dub 7. Mm-hmm. And before that, I had done my friend's rockabilly band.
Gotcha.
The Alley Beats. I just did live sound for them. They didn't make a record.
Gotcha. So you did some. You had a different style of music before Psychic TV, correct?
I mean, as a producer and sound guy, you just try to make it sound as good as it possibly can. So it wasn't like I had a style. I mean, there was a lot of different genres around in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. You know? Right. So I mean, we in Boston, I think we had a very good scene because we had a lot of college radio stations where just community people could just play records on the radio station. They could get a show. Right. So they could really go deep and spend a lot of money on records that you couldn't necessarily afford and expose everybody to everything, you know. Right.
Well, what's the famous line from Spinal Tap? It's not a college town.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the opposite. So you're in Boston, and talk a little bit about how you got involved in Psychic TV with Genesis P. Org.
Okay, so in '84, I was still working in the recording studio, and it was just a commercial jingle studio.
Okay.
And he was booked by some friends of mine who went to Mass Art.
Okay.
And I was out of college by then. And
still relatively young, like 23, 24?
24, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
So they were invited to play at the Massachusetts College of Art. And so Jen showed up with this guy, John Gosling, and they were somehow booked to hang out with us for like 10 days.
Interesting.
And they went off and did one show in Chicago also, but they were like just hanging out with us, hanging out, talking, you know.
Mm-hmm. And
so that's when I got to know him. I knew of Throbbing Gristle. I have a couple of their records by that point, you know.
Gotcha.
So
you had known of them, and then how did that relationship develop? I mean, I think that those guys were interested in art as well, not just music at that time, correct?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was kind of like, it's kind of so funny that you take it all seriously, the whole cult aspect of it, because it was all kind of making a mockery of cults.
Interesting.
And a play on a fan club, you know.
Uh-huh.
Like a glorified fan club. And then at certain points, Jen would actually take it seriously, and you're like, well, this guy really believes his bullshit.
So you never got involved in that side of the music then, is that right?
No, the Temple of Psychic Youth was not part of the band when I was in the band. All the members of the band, except for Jen and Paula, were not involved with it.
Gotcha. I didn't know that.
And we met, and we hang out with the kids and stuff that were into that. And it was just their little club kind of ego gratification kind of, see how far you can get away with it. But the thing is, Jen, sometimes I think when he met a person for the first time, he would size them up and see how much he could pull the wool over their eyes.
I see. Did he try that with you?
Not really, because we were hanging out for so long, for hours in a day,
I see.
And so he didn't really impress me in that respect at all. I mean, the most interesting thing I respected him was that he had edited a book about contemporary artists, which was a reference manual that was in every library where there was a reference department and artist books. And
so he was respected. Is that kind of?
I don't know about respected.
Okay. He still got his book out, pre-internet days.
Yeah, well, he was hired. That was his only straight job. I mean, it was because he was known as a controversial artist in England,
right.
And he was asked to edit this book, which was get in touch with all these contemporary artists, and then put it together in a big reference manual so everybody's listed and they have their history easily accessible to anyone in the world before the internet. Yeah.
Interesting. So that your relationship with them lasted what? I think you even earned a spot on Wikipedia as the Fred Giannelli period from '88 to '92. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, was it mainly Orig's interest in Acid House that made that kind of put you guys together on the same path?
Well, no. I mean, in '84, we became friends. Well, as friendly as you could be with an egomaniac like that.
Okay.
And he wanted to help me put out a record of mine, my first individual record that I produced myself. So I made that record after I met him, and then I went to England and cut it, and then he offered to put it out on his record label.
I see. What was the title of that album?
The name of that record project was called Turning Shrines, and it was just me and my friend Neil Sugarman, and we met this girl named Asako. And Neil went on to become quite famous. He ended up starting a label called Daptone Records, and he worked with Sharon Jones, and then he got hired to be in Amy Winehouse's big albums. So Neil eventually had a big career, much more successful musical career than I have had.
That's interesting. Is he from England?
No, Neil's from right in Massachusetts.
Interesting. That name sounds familiar. Sugarman. I'll
Yeah,
have to look that up.
He's pretty famous now. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so you cut that first album, and then you just ended up playing with Psychic TV. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. What happened was I did a second record just by myself, a very low budget one, another Turning Shrines record.
Okay.
And then Jen invited me over to England to record this kind of novelty record. It was a cover version of a Jimi Hendrix song. And I asked him if I could. I had met his daughter in '85. She was a little girl then, and she had a cute little English voice. And I thought, well, I have this funny arrangement of Jimi Hendrix's Audio Experience, and I thought it would make a great novelty record. So he invited me over to record that in the summer of '88.
Gotcha. And that's he was in London at the time?
Yeah, yeah.
He hadn't been kicked out, or he hadn't been exiled yet then, right?
I don't think he was exiled at all.
Okay.
I mean...
well, I think there's different sides to that story, right?
Yeah, he really milked that for all it was worth, like
Gotcha.
He does everything,
I see. So, but that was actually after you were with the band, right?
Yeah, so by '88, I'd gone to make this record, and then he invited me to become a member of the touring band, and I flew back home. I programmed a bunch of music material that he had and some that I had written, and we just went out on the road and did it in America in 1988.
Gotcha. And was it an international tour or just the States?
No, that first tour was like 3 months in the USA, and then we went back to England to tour England, and Margaret Thatcher had banned acid house music.
I see. And
because we had used the word acid house in our marketing, a lot of our gigs were canceled because Margaret Thatcher had banned it because it was too popular.
Interesting. I didn't know that. How did it come to her attention?
Well, basically, people were throwing raves and big parties, and they just get a sound system, go out to a big field, get generators. People would show up, park their cars there on the side of the road, and next thing you know, you have a problem.
I see. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was right there at the beginning of the whole rave scene, too, right there in the 80s.
Yeah,
too,
I mean, 88 was the big summer of acid house in England, which, confused the authorities because they thought it was just a drug scene, but really, it was a music scene that brought people together like you'd never seen before. I mean, people just got along because all of a sudden they just wanted to dance and have fun, and some of them are doing drugs, but it was not as most of them were looking for drugs.
Right. They couldn't find it. It wasn't as big of a bacchanalia as Thatcher would assume, I guess.
No, I mean, nothing is, from my perspective.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm still doing music, and it doesn't really, I don't see that much.
Gotcha. And but I mean, would you say that those were really the beginning, the real seeding of this kind of modern techno electronic groups? Like what do they have in, these weekend rave type parties that are? What's the one that's in Las Vegas?
Well, that is a very commercialized mainstream version of it, and even the Detroit Techno Festival, which my friends run, called Movement, which happens on Memorial Day, is becoming more and more commercial because people don't know the roots of it. But yeah, I mean, 1988 England was definitely the beginning of this.
It's kind of electronic
phenomenon,
rave phenomenon. Was MDMA, was Molly, was that popular back then? Was that around in those late 80s? Do you know?
Oh yeah, it was definitely around. I mean, Jen was doing a lot of it. He was interested in it and doing it and probably dealing a little bit with it, but I never got into it. So
I see. And I mean, would you say I guess all rock tours are pretty much saturated in some type of drugs. Would you say that was the case with Psychic TV on their tour?
Definitely not.
Interesting.
It was. I mean, we had two little children with us, so it was definitely more like the Partridge Family than the Ken Kesey bus.
Gotcha. The Merry Prankster. So you guys almost got signed to Elektra Records, is that right?
No, we almost got signed to. Well, we were dealing with this popular indie label called Wax Trax out of Chicago, and they didn't have any money to sign us. And then it turned out that they died of Jim Nash died of AIDS, but hadn't told anybody, and they were going bankrupt. So we didn't know at the time, but we wanted to continue working with them, but we couldn't. And then we were talking to this label called Almo Sounds, which hadn't started yet. Basically, Herb Albert and Jerry Moss had sold A&M Records for a record amount of money at that time. And we were contacted by this guy, Howard Thompson, who was one of the A&R guys for that label, vice president there. And he wanted us to sign with them, but he was going to take a sabbatical. So he basically invited me. He was working at Elektra at the time. Invited me up, informed me about this, and told me not to tell anyone for a year because when he came back, he wanted to sign us. He did keep his word. We did do demos, but we didn't get signed.
Gotcha. And then you went to record at Brilliant Studios in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, that was when we did the demos for Howard. Yeah.
Gotcha. Where was that studio? I wonder what
that was right in south of Market. It was like it was a decent rock studio, big room. I think Kurt Cobain had produced the Melvins there. That was
interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's probably now the property's probably worth like $5 million now.
Yeah, it's crazy. All of south of Market is just insanely.
Oh, it's super commercial now. It wasn't what it was like back then. It's super gritty. You had to kind of watch her.
It was pretty sketchy in that neighborhood back then, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It says here that you played in Oakland too, Mr. Floppy's Flophouse East. That's a landmark in Oakland too, right? Do you remember that?
That was like a small kind of loft party warehouse type of space, and that was after Jen got kicked out of England, or left England, decided to go back.
Well, he ended up in Northern California, right, with Winona Ryder's dad, right?
Right. So what happened was we were playing in London in probably '89, and I think Winona was over working with Francis Ford Coppola for the Dracula film.
Oh, I see.
Which was being filmed in London. And we usually did a December show in London, and there weren't many shows going on except for Gary Glitter, something like that. So we did a December show, and they came to our show, and we didn't know them. And I remember an older American guy coming backstage and talking to Jen, but it was just chaos. We were just packing up our equipment and getting ready to leave and stuff.
Gotcha.
So I remember seeing him there, and then when we went, when the raid happened in England, and they decided to go to England, they reconnected with Michael and
Michael Horowitz.
Yeah, Michael Horowitz, and they didn't even know that they were the parents of Winona Ryder.
Right. And Horowitz, by the way, is also Timothy Leary's archivist. I don't even know if Michael Horowitz is alive.
Yeah, he's still alive, and I think that's how we met Timothy Leary. Is basically Michael introduced us.
Oh, interesting. Where you met him in England or in Northern California or LA? No,
I think I never really was properly introduced to Michael, but he was there backstage.
Uh-huh.
When I was busy dealing with my equipment and stuff, and he was talking to Jen. I remember Cindy came to our gig at the Flop House.
Gotcha.
Also, so Michael and Cindy were there for that gig.
Right. And so Michael Horowitz is Winona Ryder's father, just to let people know. I don't know if that was clear. Right. So then the kick out. I mean, were you there when Jen got kicked out of England?
No, I was in Boston. And I had just spoken to our drummer, and I had this weird feeling that we were never going to work again, like a couple weeks before this happened. Jen and Paula and the kids had gone off to Nepal.
Right.
They had sold a painting by Austin Osman Spare, this, occult painter.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was very valuable, and they sold it to Chris Stein from Blondie, because Jimmy Page wouldn't buy it. The price was too high. The price was too high. Jen was gouged Chris Stein on the price. So with that money, he went off to Nepal for the holidays. And then that's when the raid happened. While
he was out of right. So that he didn't go back to UK. He went somewhere else.
No, he just decided to use that publicity and say, I'm exiled.
Right, I'm an exile.
It's not necessarily true.
It was more dramatic. But, I mean, didn't they find... I mean, some of the early art he did was very edgy, like extremely edgy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, trying to confuse people. Unfortunately, it confused people 10 years after the fact.
Gotcha. So they found some of that art that he had done decades before. Is that one of the things that... I mean, what they get called the records of civilization. I mean, there's some pretty intense phrases that the authorities talked about.
But that's like a term that was used by an MP who was himself busted for having, I don't know, prostitutes or something like that. Well, so it's like the gutter press in England really loves to exaggerate and.
Right. That's true.
Go crazy. And if you really want to understand more of the inside information that dispels a lot of the myths, I suggest you read Cozy Fanny Tootie's book, Art, Sex, Music, which is on Faber. I think it's Faber Social is the publisher.
She was one of the early members of Psychic TV, correct?
Well, before that, she was not in Psychic TV. She was in Coombe Transmissions.
Right.
And then she was a founding member of Throbbing Gristle. And she was Jen's partner for those years. And if you want to learn a lot about Jen's character, then that's That's the go-to book.
That's the foundation, right? His real name is what? Megson? Is that right? What's his last name?
Neil. Yeah.
Neil Megson.
I only knew him as Genesis, and everybody just calls him Jen. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, at some point he, transformed himself. He's still undergoing the transformation, and my understanding is that he's not in great health right now. Is that true?
It's kind of funny. I was in Denver, and I met one of his other guitarists who's also American and from Massachusetts. And we had a funny chat. We had never met, but we talked a lot about Jen, and we had a lot of laughs. And don't believe everything that Jen says.
Okay, because, I mean, through the grapevine, I'd heard he had, like, some kind of blood cancer or something like that. So.
Yeah, he supposedly has leukemia. That's what he's saying, and he raised a lot of money
I see.
for that. But I don't believe anything he says anymore. So.
Gotcha. So you, had that 4-year run, and what kind of initiated your departure from Psychic TV?
Well, basically, we did those demos in San Francisco.
Right.
And then a month later, I get a letter from Jen and Jen's lawyer, and it said that in this letter, if we did get this deal, that I would have to forfeit the first $200,000 we made to Jen.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I guess I got my walking papers. I never responded to that.
I see.
And then, as far as I was concerned, the group was done.
I see.
He had left he had abandoned the whole London, all our guys in London. Right. And that was the whole band, That was the core of it. Yeah, I mean, there were two camps in the band. There was the workers, and then there was the Porridge family,
Gotcha. And, did you ever see him engage in very strange practices? He apparently has some peculiar stuff he does. Is that true?
Well, when I was in England, I lived in his house, and it was pretty much a really boring household.
Gotcha.
What kind of practices are you referring to?
Well, he said that he met Aleister Crowley on a street in 1953 after Crowley died in 47. And that I've heard a rumor that that's how he got his name, as Genesis P-Org, is about the consumption of human semen. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct at all. I mean, Jen said that. I'm sure he said that in an interview. I think I remember reading it. But Jen got his nickname in school because I think he was running some Bible class or something.
Gotcha. I mean, and he did you ever see, like, I heard that when he was running the Temple of Psychic Youth, he wrote a book. I think it's called The Psychic Bible or something like that. Yeah. Did you ever see him writing that or doing anything with that?
That's just old documents from before I was in Psychic TV.
Oh, I see. So that was
from like the early 80s, yeah.
Gotcha. And you ever hear anything about the Process Church or anything like that?
Yeah, I met Timothy Wiley.
Gotcha. Interesting.
In '89, and he was just like a burnt out, English hippie. And he had a funny thing to say about Jen. Also, we had a good correspondence last year because I reconnected with him because I had found some old photos and I wanted him to have them. And then he just recently passed away in December.
Right.
But basically, his opinion of cults was, the whole point of a cult is to get out of the cult,
Interesting. Once you realize you're in it, you got to get out. Like
exactly.
NXIVM or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the NXIVM thing is, I think Jen wishes he had a cult like that was so financially successful.
Oh, yeah, holy smokes. Millions of dollars.
All these women and very, very wealthy donors, and it's like, wow, what a fantasy.
Yeah, no, I think that Ranieri is really living out kind of a male, teenage fantasy. He's got these wealthy women benefactors, and I talked to Frank Parlato, who had dealings with NXIVM from the early days.
Yeah,
and he's had something like 50, 55 women, and those complaints that the government put in were not for those women. It was for trafficking women under the age of 14. So there's stuff going on that the public doesn't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it was all consensual up to a certain point,
Right,
and then he
I
went
agree.
off the deep end.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that he just pushed the envelope. He started out as a multi-level marketing schemer,
Yeah.
and so it just, yeah, he's not getting out of jail. So anyway,
No,
next
he's
thing-
not going anywhere. Yeah.
Oh, no,
But
he's-
Jen wishes he had the Bronfmans.
Well, Jen did hit the jackpot, didn't he? Wasn't he involved in a fire at another record producer's house and had $1 million? Do you remember or know about that?
So yes, I know about that, and this was after I'd gotten my walking papers.
Gotcha.
He started to try to put together another psychic TV in California, and they had a gig in LA, and they went down, and this band Love and Rockets, who formerly were known as Bauhaus, were signed to Rick Rubin's label, American Records.
Rubin, right? Yeah.
And they were staying at one of his properties, which became a very nice studio. But at the time, Jen went down and they had given permission to rehearse there and crash there. And apparently, I've heard conflicting stories about that. So
Gotcha.
either they had a bunch of candles or the place burst into flames or something. But
So the nature of how the fire broke out has different stories. Is that right?
yes.
So they might have been involved, but didn't want to tell investigators or the insurance companies.
Well, because Jen was so seriously hurt, apparently, everybody was trying to not reveal what actually happened.
I see. Well, if you can get $1.5 million in a settlement, you've convinced, the insurance company that you are extremely disabled. Probably a disability or a claim of permanent disability. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know the nature of the case. That's pure speculation. But typically,
he definitely was physically hurt. He definitely, was sent to the hospital and had a huge hospital bill.
Okay.
And he had no way to pay that. And he was in the country. I don't know how he could have stayed in the country with immigration.
Interesting.
As an Englishman,
Well, he's been in the New York City or something like that for.
So yeah, that was after he was still with his. In California, he came with his first wife and his kids, and then she decided to divorce him, and then he had the accident, and then he was really down and out. And so that's when he met his second wife, who was a New York City dominatrix. And
Mary J. or what? Lady J?
Yeah, he called her Lady J.
Gotcha.
And she took him and recuperated him.
Let's see. And it
took him.
Yeah, sorry.
And it took him like 7 years to win that case. It took him a long time to win against Rick Rubin.
I didn't know that.
So he was just down and out for years, and I was still friendly with him, but it was just about re-releasing old material, and he would just give it away to labels that would put out like 20 CDs and not pay us.
Oh, interesting.
It was really bad.
That's unfortunate. It seems like that's in the smaller kind of label type stuff. That kind of stuff happened.
It happens a lot, yeah.
Happens a lot, yeah. And did you see when you were in the band like any of the kind of glimmerings or like how or why he wanted to go through this kind of intense body modification?
No, he didn't really have that when I was working with him. He had some personal peccadillos, odd things. Like he didn't like his body hair, and he had a really bad diet. He didn't eat well, and so we had some hang-ups,
Gotcha. Because I think that he did some pretty intense surgery. A lot of surgery.
Yeah. Once he got that money, he got into drugs heavily, because Jackie was a heroin addict.
Who's that? Is that his wife?
His wife,
Lady J.
Lady
Gotcha.
J.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know. That.
She became a pretty bad addict. She was probably just using when they met. But I briefly met her once before Jen had even met her, so I knew that she was kind of stumbling around on heroin.
Gotcha. And when he won the lawsuit against Rubin, was it Rubin who personally paid out, or was it his insurance company?
I think it was his insurance company, because Rick showed up with his chauffeur-driven Bentley wearing a Slayer T-shirt in jeans and his beard down to his waist like ZZ Top. He used to hang out with the guy from ZZ Top, and that was how he dressed for court, so he didn't care.
He didn't care, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, he has too much money.
Right. So after you kind of left Psychic TV, what kind of stuff have you been up to since it's been quite 20 years or something like that?
Yeah, struggling to survive, basically. I mean, I got into electronic music and I became a live electronic artist, where it's kind of like what a DJ does. It sounds like it, but it's not. It's all original and it's all from equipment.
Nice. So, I mean, I assume that from the early days you were learning a lot of that new kind of electronic equipment that was coming out. I mean, even pre-computer.
As it was coming out, before computers were used, in the late 70s, early 80s, I had started getting into synthesizers and drum machines and guitars and effects, and then samplers came out. So I was all through my, even in the jingle studio, I replaced the drummers on the jingle sessions with the drum machine.
Interesting. What the technology's super advanced at this point, right? That all these guys are using. Yeah. Do you go and are you playing at kind of venues in Massachusetts or going elsewhere? Or?
Occasionally, Massachusetts actually does not have a very good scene. I mean, like last weekend I was in Denver, Colorado, and that was great. They had a great sound system. I got a great recording, and the crowd was really receptive and excited.
So where is the biggest scenes these days? Is it California?
Well, Berlin. But in America, for the style that I like, it's more Detroit oriented.
Interesting. So Berlin and European is huge as well.
Berlin is basically the center of the universe for electronic dance music.
I didn't know that.
The genre that I like.
What would you? How would you define your genre?
It's more underground than the commercial stuff like that. Who's that guy that DJ kid that just died?
Oh, Avicii.
Avicii. Yeah, I don't know anything about that stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I mean, he knows how to write a good, catchy pop tune, I guess.
I mean, yeah. To me, that's just pop music.
Gotcha. And so, do you feel that do you still run around and kind of see some of these early characters from Psychic TV or anything like that?
No, I don't see anybody because everybody's in England.
It's still in England, right?
And Jen's in New York, and I don't want to see him because he's hideous. And his wife and children out in the West Coast, so I don't see them either.
Gotcha. So they're all, I mean, his kids have got to be in their 40s now, right?
They're probably in their 30s, yeah.
30s, right. Interesting. Did you ever kind of come across some of those early members of Psychic TV, people like, I don't know, they liked Burroughs, right? Peter Christopherson, some of those other characters.
I met Sleazy late in his life. I met him up in Montreal, which turned out to be the very last Coil show.
Interesting.
And he was really nice. I mean, his reputation is, a lot of these people, their reputations are much more scarier than their personalities, you know what I mean?
Well, he was very intelligent. He was the son of a notable professor. I found that out recently. Christopherson's dad was like a mathematician in London, England or somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Jen exaggerated the importance of Sleazy's family, but, Sleazy was just a really kind of shy,
intellectual. Would you describe him as an intellectual?
Yeah, he was kind of thoughtful, but he's also extremely, homosexual, and
right.
and a little undercurrents of that. But,
Did you ever see him with John Balance or just him alone?
No, the Coil show in Montreal was when John Balance did not go, so it became the last show. And then shortly after that, like a couple months later, he died.
Right. He's a pretty heavy drinker too, right?
He was all messed up, yeah.
Yeah, so, Christopherson, I mean, my understanding is that he kind of trolled the gay underground, leather bars and stuff like that. Is that true?
I mean, he was part of the famous Hypnosis design team.
Right.
So he did a lot of record covers for
Pink Floyd,
Peter Gabriel's first 3 albums, Genesis. Yeah. He took a lot of photos for those records. He did the last Led Zeppelin record, the cover of that one.
Right, with the obelisk.
And then, with the obelisk.
Obelisk, yeah.
Yeah. And then he, became a video director, a very successful video director, which he wouldn't even talk about.
That's interesting.
He was making a lot of money during the heyday of MTV.
I didn't know that. He did a lot of videos, but I'm surprised that he wouldn't be so. Why would you think that he didn't want to talk about that?
Well, because he wanted to be known for his art, and that's why he was proud of Coil, and he just gave up on Psychic TV and working with Jen. He really had harsh words to say about Jen. Also,
I didn't know that. But all those guys were Illuminates, right? Weren't they all members of the Illuminates of Thanateros, all the Coil members?
I'm not sure what their scene was, because they were a very heavy gay scene, and I'm not gay, so it wasn't really that my interest.
I didn't know that. Did you ever kind of come across a lot of William Burroughs stuff when you were with Psychic TV or those guys? I mean, it seems like he was kind of their hero.
Well, I was born the same day as Jack Kerouac, so I've known about the whole beatnik era since the '60s,
right?
When I was growing up, and then David Bowie was really into name dropping William S. Burroughs in the '70s.
Gotcha. It wasn't Kerouac born in Lowell? That's where you're from, right?
He's from Lowell, yeah. Right. A friend of my dad's best friend, played football against Jack Kerouac in high school and then in college. And then Kerouac dropped out of college and stopped playing football. Gotcha. Started writing.
Yeah, I'm glad he did. On the Road's a great one. Good one. And then, how did you follow this whole Damien Echols to Salem issue? Because I remember you were on some of those boards with Salem 4 or 5 years ago. Right.
Well, what happened was I didn't know Damien. I remember the West Memphis 3 case, and I knew he was sent away, and I thought they were innocent at the time. It looked like they were railroaded.
Gotcha.
So
your opinion has changed?
No, I still think he was railroaded.
Okay.
I think it was one of the stepfathers of the kid that did it. But
right. Terry Hobbs?
Yeah, it sounds like it was. That guy looks sketchy.
Gotcha. So that's kind of what attracted you. That's how I came across your name, was through that whole thing and situation in Salem with Mike Blatty and all those people.
So what happened was Echols got out of prison, and next thing I see in the music press was that he was going to be in this little film, and the clip.
Right, IRL, right, with Jen.
And then I'm just laughing like, oh, the poor guy. How much bad luck can you have in your life? You get sent away for 18 years for something you didn't do, and then you have to meet that asshole,
Oh, man. Holding a shotgun, no less. There was a rumor out there that he was not supposed to hold weapons, and that he had to fly back to Arkansas to deal with his probation officer.
Really?
Yeah. That's a rumor. I don't
know.
Somebody told me that. But, and they're both... What does Genesis say in that clip? Bazooka Joe or something like that? Some kind of random statement?
I don't know. That's all I know is Jen does not like chewing gum, and they made him chew gum, so that was kind of good to torture him.
Gotcha.
But that was just a stupid little, art project by some publisher in New York.
Right. IRL. I don't think that movie was more than 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was like, then the next thing I see, it's like Echols moves to Salem, and he's like down the street from me.
Right.
So it was kind of funny when. Like Halloween had already happened. I think I was out of town for Halloween that year. And then I was riding my scooter over to Marblehead to go get coffee one morning. It's a cold, November morning. And I see Echols walking all by himself on the sidewalk. And I just pull over the scooter and say, "Hey, Damien Echols, I got to talk to you." And I kind of scared him, He's like, "Huh? Who's this guy?" And then I started telling him about Jen, and next thing you know, we're just laughing our heads off,
That's interesting.
Because he was, his book was coming out, so I said, all right, I'm going to come down to your book signing next week.
Right, Life After Death.
Yeah, the first one, right?
Right. Yeah,
so I go to Harvard Square, and I go to the book signing, and then I'm waiting to, at the end, and he goes to Lori, his wife. He's like, Lori, this is the guy I was telling you about, the guy who knows Jen. And she was laughing. She was just like, oh my God, he's so creepy.
That's funny. So what was did Eccles just know Orange from that movie, or was he aware of him? Okay.
No, he had just met this weirdo in this film, yeah.
Because there's another picture of them together with other people, with Ferrera, or whatever the girl is, who's the lead on that movie.
Yeah, she was in the movie too. But I think, they ended up getting in touch again when Jen had that show at the Rubin Museum. No relation to Rick Rubin.
Right.
And I guess Damien did some tours and stuff. But I don't keep in touch with him. I just would bump into him in Salem every day,
Interesting.
Because he was right down the street, and it's a really tiny town.
Yeah, I mean, and there was, I kind of followed it. I wouldn't say intensely, but I was definitely keeping tabs on a lot of the stuff that had gone on, just because of all of the activity on that message board.
Yeah, I mean, Vlad was right down the street too, and he was trying to get everybody in Salem upset about this guy, and it's like, well, he's already gone through the prison system.
Right.
He seems like he's rehabilitated. He probably didn't even do anything. And, if prison, I mean, he's a model prisoner if rehabilitation works, So why are you harassing this guy, especially in a town called Salem, Massachusetts?
Well, there's a lot of strange overlaps because, Eccles has an interest in the occult. Salem was where the witch trials were. Mike Blatty is the son of Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist, a copy of which was in Eccles' room. There's a picture of it in one of the police photos of The Exorcist. So it's just all this overlapping strangeness. And then you're involved, too, who's friends with Orange, who was in the movie. It's just a small world.
It's a very small world. And Blatty ended up communicating to me quite nice and apologizing. He ended up becoming so obsessed with getting Damien Eccles, and nobody was joining his cause, that he just moved. He just slithered out of town and moved to Oregon. Yeah,
he's out. He went to 3,000 miles away. But so did Eccles himself.
And then Eccles got bored after a year because it's a small town. If you can afford to live in New York, do it. Gotcha. I would do it.
Well, the word on the street is he was doing his some magic class but didn't get a business license. Did you hear that story?
No, I don't know. He seemed pretty organized with that stuff, but, it's all kind of, hocus pocus and new age stuff. So that's not really my scene. So,
gotcha. Well, he's putting out a book on Halloween this year called High Magic with Eddie Vedder. I don't know. God only knows what is in that.
Yeah, he seems to be connected with a lot of wealthy people, so he's doing all right for himself.
That's the truth. I mean, if you raise $20 million for your defense fund, you can get the best of everything. Money can buy you the best attorneys, etc.
Yeah, I think Peter Jackson used a lot of that Hobbit profits to help someone that he thought was, innocent, basically.
Right. Well, they flew him down to New Zealand. The rumor is, and I don't know if you can verify this, that Eccles is like an orc in one of the films. Is that true? Have you heard that?
I think I did see some press of that. Yeah.
I haven't verified that. So we're at about 45 minutes. We've covered a lot of subject matter, covered a lot of stuff. Anything else that you would like to add, or anybody wants to contact you, or anything like that?
Well, I just think I think you're. I don't know if you're a Christian or.
Yes, I would say I'm Christian.
Yeah. All right. So you're a Christian, and you seem to have this fascination with this stuff.
Well, I was Crowley researcher, and so I was tracing the impact of Crowley on the 20th century. So I came across a bunch of different people, one of which was Genesis, who said he met Crowley, and so I covered a lot of people. So Genesis was one of them, so I kept an interest in Genesis, and that was really how I got interested in the West Memphis 3 case, was that Damien Eccles, there was an interest in Crowley. I had actually not even followed that case probably till 2011, 2012.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so then once I found out that Aleister Crowley was involved in the case, and that Damien Eccles, and they actually talked about it on the stand, I researched it, and I actually had a copy of Magic and Theory and Practice during the case. There was one of the prosecutors had it, and Damien Eccles was writing Aleister Crowley's name in kind of this code. that's in this. So that was really it. And so I was like, okay, well, Eccles, he said on the stand he knew everything about the occult or the esoteric or something like that, not verbatim, but so, we have a differing opinion on guilt on the West Memphis Three. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, also one thing I would like to point out is that you mentioned William Burroughs and Crowley as big influences on Psych TV, and I would say that it's not those two. It's actually Burroughs' friend, Brian Geisen, who is more of a mentor, and Jen was definitely more enamored with Brian Geisen.
Interesting. What was the cut-up technique, and didn't he stare at, like, different types of lights and stuff to try to get a different consciousness?
I don't know. I didn't know Brian, but yeah, he did things like that.
Yeah.
He was also, came up with the Dream Machine flickering light.
Right,
thing.
Dream Machine, that's what I was thinking about. There's pictures of Orge with Burroughs, so I know that.
Oh yeah, Jen had brought William S. Burroughs and Brian Geisen to England for a performance, and that was the first Psychic TV show.
What, from Morocco?
In the early 80s. No, I think Burroughs was then living in New York by that point.
Gotcha.
And Geisen was in Paris. And then regarding, magic, Jen was not that big a Crowley fanatic. He was definitely more interested in Austin Osman Spare, who was an artist who was a contemporary of Crowley's, and Austin Spare did not like Crowley.
They had some correspondence. They were definitely aware of each other, but nobody really liked Crowley. At the end of the day, I don't think that he was a likable character generally, but yeah. I think I've read some of the correspondence in the 30s, so they were definitely talking, but definitely not hanging out with each other.
No, they were not friendly. And also, Crowley was so poor in Berlin, and there's a really excellent book by this guy Tobias something about Crowley's years.
The Beast in Berlin.
The Beast in Berlin. It's very, very funny because it's like it doesn't make sense that these satanic figures and these people think you sold your soul to the devil, and it's like, well, don't you get any money for that? Because
right.
It seems like they have nothing but bad luck.
Well, that's really an excellent point. That's very true. There's a lot of bad luck that runs in these people's lives. Crowley in particular, who had a substantial inheritance that he dissipated and then was on the streets, Berlin, begging for money, trying to check his mail to make sure somebody sent him cash, and then he would spend it. He was a very peculiar character because he could have taken that money and invested it and lived like a king. Yeah.
And that's the same thing with Jen. He gets this windfall and he just frittered it away. Became a heroin addict, blew it all on drugs, blew it all on ketamine, blew it all on plastic surgery, and it's just like self-indulgent twats. That's what they are.
Well, that's it's the life of an occultist is often strange. Wiley's an interesting point too. I think he was on Hamilton Morris's show snorting. Snorting PCP. Snorting PCP. He's got to be in his 60s.
Poor Timothy was like, I think, because the process cult was so rigorous and anti-drug, and they were all celibate and
super intense, structured, super structured, very difficult grades to go up. You had to do 6 months of service, all this stuff.
Yeah. Once he got out of the process, he had a lot of catching up to do. So.
Gotcha. He wanted to get back. He was number 3. He was one of the.
He was their guinea pig. He was the original.
He really was. That's really true. Yeah. What is it? Best Friends Society and all that stuff.
Well, he was. He went to school with Robert, architecture school. So.
Robert de Grimston, right? Robert Moore.
Yeah.
I think Moore is still around somewhere in New York, right?
He is. He's hiding. I think he works for like AOL or something. Last anyone heard of him.
Hiding in plain sight. Yeah. He was known as the Omega, and they had to talk to him through like a tapestry or a wall or some crap like that.
It's kind of like Vanguard, same thing.
No, dude, Vanguard, yeah. Oh,
it's the same blueprint of stupidity.
The top people at control, the other people trying to learn the secret knowledge, but the center people always maintain their control,
It's all about conning people to give you their money. That's what it basically boils down to, and living off of their work, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anything else you want to add, Fred?
No, it's kind of funny that you're so knowledgeable about all this stuff, and yet take it really seriously.
Well, you've been on the inside. I'm on the outside. You know?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I can't really say I've never. You know, I think that really, if you look at a lot of Crowley was actually rather hapless. You know, with his followers and who abandoned him, and there wasn't like this real community of love with Crowley, even at the Abbey of Thelema. So, you know, I'm beginning to have a more nuanced view of these cults as really kind of super dysfunctional. You know, not very organized, really.
Yeah,
a lot of people fall in and out.
It's the same with Gurdjieff and other supposed masters. You know, they're all kind of full of shit.
Well, shit. That's a good way to leave it. Fred Giannelli, do you have any contact information or anything you want to leave for anybody, or we can just
well, it's FredX at Telepathica, FREDEX, telepathica.com.
Gotcha. And you're on social media. You're on Facebook and Twitter, right? You're on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm being a nuisance everywhere and barely surviving.
Fred Giannelli, formerly of Psychic TV, and really, you've been in the electronic game for at least 40 years, man. You should write a book.
I don't have time to.
All right, Fred. Thank you very much.
Nice chatting to you.
Nice chatting with you too. I appreciate your time.
Take
Have
care.
a good day. Bye bye.